If you've ever felt a little embarrassed when speaking English, you're definitely not alone.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all had those moments where we say something and then immediately think, wait, that's not right.
Exactly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learning English Studio.
Hi, everyone. I'm James.
And I'm Amelia. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Before we dive in, if you're enjoying our show, please take a moment to subscribe to Learning English Studio. It really helps us keep creating these episodes for you.
It really does. Every subscription means a lot to us. Okay, James, are you ready to talk about something that every English learner goes through?
I was born ready. This is a topic I think is super important and will really help our listeners feel more confident.
Perfect. Today, we're going to chat about some of the most common mistakes that beginners make when learning English. And don't worry, this is a judgment-free zone.
That's right. We're not here to point fingers. We're here to help you avoid these little pitfalls so you can sound more natural more quickly.
So, where should we start, James? There are so many potential mistakes we could talk about.
That's a good question. I think a great place to begin is with something almost every beginner struggles with: articles. You know, a, an, and the.
Oh, the articles. Yes, that's a classic. I remember learning about them and it feeling so confusing. Why don't you explain for our listeners why they can be so tricky?
Well, many languages don't use articles in the same way English does, or they don't use them at all. So learners often either drop them completely or use the wrong one. For example, saying, I have cat, instead of I have a cat.
Right, or using the when they should use a, like I bought the new phone, when it should be I bought a new phone, unless they're talking about a specific phone they both already know about.
Exactly. And then there's the difference between a and an. A lot of beginners know the basic rule about vowels, but they might get tripped up by words like our or university.
Oh, that's a great point. So it's not about the letter, but about the sound. An hour because the H is silent, but a university because it starts with a U sound, not an a sound.
Precisely. And let's not forget when not to use any article at all, like with general concepts. For example, I love music, not I love the music, unless you're talking about specific music.
That's a subtle but important distinction. So what's a good tip for our listeners to practice this?
Well, I think the key is to pay attention to how native speakers use articles. When you're reading or listening, notice when they use a, an, the, or no article at all. Over time, you'll start to develop a feel for it.
That's great advice. It's all about exposure and developing that intuitive sense rather than just memorizing rules. What's another common mistake you often hear, James?
Let's think. Oh, I know. Prepositions of time. That's a big one. In, on, and at can be so confusing.
Oh, tell me about it. In the morning, on Monday, at 5 o'clock. It can feel so random to beginners.
It really can. I often hear things like on morning or at Monday. And then you have all the exceptions, like at night, but in the evening.
Yes, English is full of these little exceptions that can drive learners crazy. So is there any logic to it, or is it just memorization?
Well, there are some general patterns. We usually use at for specific times, on for days and dates, and in for longer periods like months, years, seasons, and decades.
So at 3 p.m. on Saturday, in July, in 2023, in summer. That makes sense.
Right, but then you have expressions like at the moment, on the weekend, and in the future that just need to be learned as chunks.
That's a good point. Sometimes it's better to learn these phrases as complete expressions rather than trying to figure out the logic behind each preposition.
Exactly. And I think it's helpful for learners to know that even advanced speakers sometimes pause to think about the right preposition, so it's okay if you don't get it right every time.
That's reassuring to hear. Nobody's perfect, not even native speakers. Let's move on to another common area of difficulty. What about verb tenses? That's a huge topic, but are there any particular tense mistakes that beginners often make?
Oh, absolutely. One that comes to mind is mixing up the present simple and present continuous. For example, saying, I am liking pizza instead of I like pizza.
Right, because stative verbs like, love, want, need, believe usually aren't used in the continuous form. That's a tricky rule for many learners.
Definitely. And then there's the classic third-person S in the present simple. So many beginners forget to add it, saying he play tennis instead of he plays tennis.
Yes, that's probably one of the first mistakes every English learner makes and eventually corrects. It's like a rite of passage.
It really is. And then you have the past tense, especially irregular verbs. I often hear things like, I buyed a new car, or she goed to the store.
Oh, those are so common. And you can't blame learners for trying to apply the regular ed rule to all verbs. It's logical, even if it's not correct.
Exactly. And then there's the present perfect, which is a whole other can of worms. Many languages don't have a tense equivalent to it, so learners might say, I saw that movie yesterday, when they should say, I have seen that movie, if they want to emphasize the experience rather than when it happened.
That's a great point. The present perfect is all about connecting the past to the present, which is a concept that can be hard to grasp if your native language doesn't have it.
And let's not forget the future tense. Many beginners will say, I will to go, instead of I will go or I'm going to go.
That's a good one. So what's your advice for learners struggling with verb tenses?
I think it's helpful to focus on one tense at a time and really master it before moving on to the next one. And again, exposure is key. The more you hear and read English, the more natural these tenses will become.
That's great advice. It's all about taking it step by step and not getting overwhelmed by trying to learn everything at once. You know, James, we've talked about grammar, but what about vocabulary mistakes? Are there any common ones you've noticed?
Oh, definitely. One that comes to mind is false friends, words that look similar in English and in the learner's native language but have different meanings.
Oh, those can be so tricky. Can you give us an example?
Sure, for Spanish speakers, embarazada means pregnant, not embarrassed. So a beginner might say, I'm embarazada when they mean I'm embarrassed, which could lead to some awkward situations.
Oh my goodness, yes, that's a classic. I can only imagine the confusion that would cause. Are there other examples like that?
For French speakers, library in English looks like librairie in French, which means bookstore. So they might say, I'm going to the library to buy a book, when they mean I'm going to the bookstore.
That's another good one. It really shows how important it is to not assume that similar-looking words mean the same meaning.
Exactly. And then there are words that are easily confused even if they're not false friends, like affect and effect, or accept and accept.
Oh, those are tricky even for native speakers sometimes. I still have to pause and think about which one to use in certain contexts.
Me too. And let's not forget about collocations, words that naturally go together. Beginners might say, make a party instead of have a party, or do a mistake instead of make a mistake.
That's such an important point. English is full of these fixed expressions that just need to be learned as they are.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to learn collocations is through exposure. When you're reading or listening, pay attention to which words are used naturally together.
That's great advice. It's all about developing that intuitive sense of what sounds right in English. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about pronunciation. That's a huge area where beginners often struggle.
Oh, definitely. English pronunciation can be so challenging, especially with all the silent letters and inconsistent spelling rules.
Right, like the K in no or the B in det. Why are those letters even there if they're not pronounced?
I know, right? And then you have words like through, though, tough, and thought that look similar but are pronounced so differently.
That's a great example. English spelling and pronunciation can feel so random sometimes. What are some common pronunciation mistakes you've noticed?
Well, one is not stressing the right syllable in a word. For example, saying photograph instead of photographer. The meaning can change completely depending on where you put the stress.
Oh, that's such an important point. And it's something that learners often don't realize is important until they're not understood.
Exactly. And then there are sounds that don't exist in many languages, like the TH sound in think or the R sound in American English.
Right, and learners might substitute these sounds with the closest one in their native language, which can make their speech harder to understand.
And let's not forget about intonation. English has a very specific melody, and using the wrong intonation can change the meaning of a sentence or just make it sound unnatural.
That's such a good point. You can have perfect grammar and vocabulary, but if your intonation is off, people might still struggle to understand you or might misinterpret your meaning.
Exactly. So what's your advice for learners struggling with pronunciation, Amelia?
Well, I think listening is key. The more you listen to native English speakers, the more familiar you'll become with the sounds and rhythm of the language. And don't be afraid to imitate what you hear, even if it feels silly at first.
That's great advice, and recording yourself speaking can be really helpful too. You might not realize you're making a mistake until you hear it played back.
Absolutely. And remember, it's okay to have an accent. The goal is to be understood, not to sound like a native speaker. Accents are beautiful and show where you come from. You know, James, we've covered a lot of ground today, but there's one more area I think we should touch on: word order.
Oh, that's a big one. English word order can be so different from other languages, and getting it wrong can completely change the meaning of a sentence.
Right. For example, putting the adjective after the noun, like in car red instead of red car. That's a mistake I often hear from beginners.
Exactly. And then there's the order of adjectives. If you want to describe a car as being big, red, and new, you need to say a big, new, red car, not a red, big, new car. The order matters.
Wow, I never even realized there was a specific order for adjectives. That's so subtle.
It really is. And then you have questions. Many beginners will say, "You are from where?" instead of "Where are you from?" because that's the word order in their native language.
Right, and then there are phrasal verbs where the position of the particle can change the meaning, like look up the word versus look the word up.
Exactly. And don't even get me started on embedded questions like, "Do you know where the station is?" instead of, "Do you know where is the station?"
Yes, that's another classic mistake that can take a while to get right. So what's your advice for learners struggling with word order?
I think it's helpful to learn sentence patterns as chunks rather than individual words. For example, learn "I'd like to" as a complete expression for making a polite request rather than learning would, like, and to separately.
That's a great tip. And again, exposure is key. The more you read and listen to English, the more natural the correct word order will become to you.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve.
You know, James, we've talked a lot about common mistakes today, but I want to emphasize that making mistakes is a natural part of learning any language.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, making mistakes is a sign that you're pushing yourself and trying to use the language in new ways. It's much better to make mistakes than to not speak at all for fear of making them.
That's so true. I think every language learner, including us, has made countless mistakes on their journey to fluency. It's just part of the process.
Exactly. And the good news is that the more you use English, the fewer mistakes you'll make. It's all about practice and persistence.
That's such an important message for our listeners. Don't be discouraged by mistakes. Embrace them as learning opportunities.
Absolutely. And remember, even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. Nobody's perfect, and that's okay.
Well, James, we've covered so many common mistakes today, from articles and prepositions to verb tenses, vocabulary, pronunciation, and word order. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Let me think. Oh, I know. One thing I'd like to add is the importance of context. Sometimes what seems like a mistake in a grammar exercise might be perfectly acceptable in real-life conversation.
That's such a great point. Language is all about communication, not just following rules. If people understand what you mean, then you're succeeding, even if your grammar isn't perfect.
Exactly. And I think it's helpful for learners to focus on communication first and grammar second. Of course, grammar is important, but don't let it paralyze you or prevent you from speaking.
That's wonderful advice. The goal is to communicate, not to be grammatically perfect every time.
And one last thing. Don't compare yourself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace, and what's easy for one person might be challenging for another. Focus on your own progress and celebrate your achievements, no matter how small.
That's such an important message. Learning a language is a personal journey, and everyone's path is different.
Absolutely. And remember, you're capable of more than you think. With time, practice, and persistence, you can achieve fluency in English.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Learning English Studio. I hope our discussion has been helpful and has given you some insights into common mistakes to avoid as you learn English.
I hope so too, and remember, making mistakes is normal and even beneficial. It's all part of the learning process.
Absolutely. And to all our listeners out there, remember that making mistakes is a natural part of learning. Don't let fear of mistakes hold you back from using and improving your English.
Exactly. Keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep speaking. Every conversation is an opportunity to improve.
And don't forget to subscribe to Learning English Studio so you don't miss our future episodes. We have lots more great content coming your way.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review or sharing it with your friends who are learning English. It really helps us reach more learners like you.
You can also find us on social media. Just search for Learning English Studio on your favorite platforms.
Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Until then, happy learning!
Happy learning, everyone. Goodbye.